Michael, this whole idea that, Kamala Harris is going to have Republicans, people who disagree with her, a dynamic in the White House that is associated with differing opinions, whereas Trump seems to be on the Loyalist plan, which is everybody who is around him will essentially be in lockstep with him. But more to the point, and the question for you, he also really makes a point of saying, I'm going after those who I think he starts with, who have pursued me politically and legally for political reasons. But it kind of is a message that I'm going to make it a part of my administration. I'm going to go after people who disagree with me. Adam Schiff and Cheney, et cetera. Why is that politically a winner for him?
Well, I mean, because he's playing to his crowd and not necessarily, he's playing to his rally and not necessarily to the presidency at that point. And they made a decision when the postmortems are written about this election, whatever happens tomorrow and in the coming days. I think people are going to look at Trump's tactic. And I don't know that he knows how any other way to run for president, but he has tried to cement his base, energize his base, and keep them in tow rather than expanding his base, which to me is a curious tactic. It also may just be that this is a candidate who that's the only way he knows how to run. And if the country had seen more of Donald Trump the way we saw J.D. Vance at a debate rather than how we see him on the stump, I think it would have gone a long way toward getting more people interested in voting for him. Again, it may not matter. Even if I'm right about that, it may be a successful strategy. But I do think that that's where that sort of the loyalty and the vindictiveness, people that like Donald Trump are people who like sticking it to any other that exists. So it's the liberals, own the libs, own the people who aren't loyal to you. And all those people are coming out now. I mean, the loyalty is interesting because so many people are disloyal to him in ways that we've not seen a precedent, right? We've never seen anybody as disloyal. Jerry Terhorst was Gerald Ford's press secretary, who after he pardoned Nixon stepped down and said, I can't be in that administration because he pardoned Richard Nixon. But we don't see people peel away the way they've peeled away from Donald Trump. There are people that will leave an administration after a couple of years as cabinet secretaries, but that's almost normal, even 4 years, and then cede it to another person. And this is the person who has demanded loyalty, has not seen it. And yeah, it's window dressing what Harris is saying to put a Republican in her cabinet. It's not going to be Lincoln's team of rivals. George Bush had Norm Mineta, who was a Democrat in his cabinet as Secretary of Transportation. There have been others in recent history. It doesn't change the tenor of the fact that she would be a president who's a Democrat with a Democratic agenda, but it still does say something about what loyalty and how it's defined for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and it's more than just resignations. So these are people who've come out and full-throatedly endorsed the opposing candidate and spoken of the danger of the guy they used to work for.
Yeah, we've never seen anything like it. Certainly anyone who is alive has never seen. We never really even saw it with Nixon, right? I mean, Nixon was gone by the time that would have mattered, really. But the people that were loyal to Nixon remained loyal to him to the end. They didn't become turncoats until it was time to be in a court of law. And there you saw John Dean and maybe none other who did that. People are loyal in politics, generally speaking. And when they're done, they don't come back with guns blazing the way that so many in the Trump administration has.
If Trump loses, he is legally toast, says Hassan in a super chat. So is Elon Musk. His being illegal before his green card is the opening Dems need to remove him from Starlink. There is going to be no removal of Elon Musk. He has way too much power. I've talked to you about this before. He's trying to consolidate that power, add to his power, augment that power in different ways by essentially buying a president. But apart from that, Elon Musk is immensely powerful already within the U.S. government, and they depend on him for any number of things way beyond Starlink. His SpaceX is very much dependent upon by this country. I want to ask you about the Iowa stuff.
Yeah.
If you would, Tony, just put up a couple of these screen grabs. Now, this is the Seltzer thing, and I'm sure you are very much familiar with the Seltzer polling in
Yeah.
Iowa. This is the track record that the Seltzer poll has, so it's really quite impressive. The prediction and then the result on the right. And almost to an election, this polling is right on. So it reflects something pretty accurately. So go ahead, Tony, to the next slide. And now this is, of course, what's getting all the headlines, deservedly so, I guess. But I want to ask you how important it is. Harris now ahead with likely voters, according to the Seltzer poll, 47% to 44%. Talk to me about this significance and if it extends beyond Iowa. I don't hear it, Michael.
The only I'm muted because of a dog.
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
Bark. So the only there's no caveat to this. What this is the most telling thing to me about this election, just because of Ann Seltzer's record and the how well, and you saw it right there. The only thing that was wrong was a 2018 governor's election, which a lot of people had wrong, but Seltzer did too. I guess it was Kim Reynolds was running. Yeah, 2018. I think a guy named Fred Hubble, if I'm not mistaken, but it doesn't matter. That was the only thing that she was wrong on. She polls that state better than anybody. So it, to me, is the most telling thing in this election, in the waning days of the election, in that it is a very white state as Iowa. It means to me that white women are going to Kamala Harris. It means to me, when you look at, if you drill down into the crosstabs of that poll, as I did, and you look at some of the other races as well, there are two congressional races that are now in play. One in the Des Moines area, that's Polk County there, which shows Marionette Miller Meeks is down by a lot there, and that's telling me that white women are really moving towards Harris at the end of this race. It doesn't mean that Iowa is going to go blue. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't bet on that. But it does mean that if you extrapolate from this poll and you look at other parts of the Midwest, whether it be Michigan or Wisconsin, Wisconsin, a state that is adjacent to Iowa, that you'll see a lot of the same behaviors there, because voters in that region tend to behave similarly. It also tells me right now that the state of the race is closing. Seltzer does her polls very late. She does her famous poll is the Iowa caucus poll, which comes out on the Friday or Saturday before the Iowa caucus, which is on a Monday. And she's insanely accurate over a long period of time with that poll. And so if this is the closing poll in Iowa, it's not exclusive to Iowa. It's happening in other places, but it's happening with a demographic that is typically Republican, typically a demographic that Trump would rely upon. So it's happening in that demographic, and he's not getting the other reliably Democratic demographics to vote for him, then he's in a lot of trouble. He's in a lot of trouble in a lot of places. So that's why this poll, to me, says a lot. We don't know if it's an outlier because Iowa isn't polled that much, so it is the poll. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. But she isn't wrong by much when she is wrong. And I would look at this and I would say this tells me a lot. I was sort of very, very moved by all the information in this poll.
It's quite extraordinary, that one graphic we have up now, if you see how this race was completely transformed by the exit of Biden. I mean, it really is starkly evident. Now you have a candidate on the Democrat side that is leading Trump, again, in this poll, but same poll back in June, the race wasn't even close. I mean,
it wasn't, but if you had polled Harris in June either, if she'd been the candidate, it probably would have been similar to the Biden numbers, and Biden would not have polled, I don't think, at 32 today. Excuse me, but we don't know. I mean, those are things we can't know, but we do know that the enthusiasm gap was absolutely tightened and closed by Harris getting into the race and by the president standing down. So it doesn't even matter what the hypotheticals are. It's it's very interesting to look at one state that is not a state that anybody looks at in presidential elections and see what that tells us about the state of the race. And the Biden to Harris numbers that you just showed us are accurate. They're true. I mean, what you said is right, Mark. There is a huge difference, but it just shows you that the enthusiasm gap closed. And not only that, Kamala Harris is ahead in a state like Iowa.
Yeah, quite extraordinary. it's still the case, Michael, that Iowa, and you just alluded to it in a prior remark, is not a state that will likely go for Kamala Harris. But you note that these voting blocks exist in other states as well.
Well,
I
what
thought,
they do, and
yeah,
they're and these are so. Let's say you say, well, she's going to get the black vote out in better ways than President Biden would have, and certainly better than Trump will. That she's going to get younger voters, that she's going to get union voters, all of those things that you rely upon. Well, there aren't a ton in Iowa. There are not a ton of black voters. There are not a ton of Latino voters who are angry about what happened at Madison Square Garden. So that has nothing to do with that, and she's still ahead in Iowa. That's why this poll I find to be so fascinating, and I believe Ann Seltzer. I mean, I think that her methodology in that state, which is a pretty easy state to poll, people always say, why are the Iowa caucuses in this state that don't really reflect the country? Well, one of the things about Iowa voters is they are engaged and interested, and unlike most political rallies and during caucus season, you'll go to, say, a Ted Cruz gathering, which is 17 people in a coffee shop, and you'll speak to the voters there, and they'll say, no, I'm not with Cruz. I'm shopping. I'm listening to what they have to say. It is a really engaged electorate. And so their polling becomes, I think, even more accurate than others.
the ground game we hear so much of, Michael. Top officials with Kamala Harris's presidential campaign boasting to reporters this weekend about their get out the vote efforts, including launching 57,000 volunteer shifts for door knocking and phone banking. It is bananas big, said an official, noting that the campaign knocked on 807,000 doors in Pennsylvania alone, Michael Shure. The
Yeah.
campaign also expressed optimism with early vote numbers, noting black and youth turnout was increasing as the early vote period ended in key states. This in contrast to, and again, I'm asking you because I don't know that this is predictive, it's just a fact that Trump just pulled the plug on whatever ground game there was and turned the whole thing over turnkey to Elon Musk. And Musk became essentially, he farmed it out even further. So it would seem as though Democrats, from a ground game perspective, from that door knocking, from going out into the community, they have a clear, distinct edge in some of these swing states.
Yeah, and it goes down to money too. I mean, Kamala Harris outraised the former president by a lot of money, and that money is not just commercials, right? It's not just an ad that runs on the World Series. That's money that is spent on people and organization. It is, yes, there are a lot of volunteers, thousands and thousands of volunteers, but there are paid people that are organizing those volunteers. And when you have the money to pay more people, you're going to get a much better ground game, much better field operation than if you don't. And that's why, almost out of desperation, the kowtowing to Elon Musk was important to Trump, because he was able to get somebody who had a lot of reach to come in and do that. But Elon Musk is not a political operative in America, and canvassing and going door to door is irreplaceable. As George H.W. Bush used to say, similarly to Mayor Ed Koch in New York, that any hand I shake, I have to believe is a vote for me. So I want to shake as many hands as I can. Well, while that's not true, obviously, it is close to true. As someone who actually ran for office, I know that going door to door, you walk away from every positive interaction thinking that those are the people that are going to vote for you. And I knocked on, let's say 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 doors in a small place, and I feel like most of the votes I got were people that I shook hands with. So that face-to-face contact by your campaign is so important, and the Harris people know it, especially in a place like Pennsylvania, a very, very big and clearly important state.
Kim?
You just kind of answered my question, but I know two people who came from California and went to different states. I have a friend in Nevada who this morning is knocking on doors, and I have a friend, Carla Marinucci, who's in Michigan right now knocking on doors as well. And so, you go to all this expense, you travel to these places, you think you're moved to make a difference. And I just wonder if my thinking was, at this late stage of the game, people have already made up their mind. Many of us have already cast our ballot. So does that knocking on doors the day before the election, does it matter?
Right. Well, it does matter. I mean, it's like when you're watching a tragedy on television, they say it's moved from search and rescue to search and recovery. Well, the campaign in its waning days is not about convincing people, changing minds. It's not about persuasion. It's about getting out your base. So Carla, who probably, a friend too, who I've known for many years, who's probably covered many of those door knocking and canvassing moments in different campaigns around the state, going and being out there. That's not to try and meet an undecided voter and say this is why Donald Trump should vote. That's about meeting a Democrat and saying, do you have a plan to vote? Do you have someone you can bring to the polls with you? Do you have a way of getting there? Do you know where you're registered? Do you know where your polling place is? So that's why in the closing days of a campaign, it's all about getting people to vote who are your base, and that's that's what these candidates have been doing over the past couple of days. Certainly over the last weekend of the campaign.
We only have 30 seconds. Prediction as to when we'll know who the new president will be.
If it's a blowout, listen, one little tidbit that nobody's talking about that screamed at me was when I saw Donald Trump go campaign in New Mexico. And the reason that spoke to me was he shouldn't be there. And there's a reason he's there. And the reason he's there is because something isn't going well elsewhere. It was a small stop. It was at the end of the week last week. And it said, man, he's going to New Mexico now. That's not where he ought to be. And so if this is a blowout, I think you're going to know it earlier than you think. I don't know that it's going to be a blowout. No poll has said it's going to be a blowout, but these are about lots of different states, 7, 8, 9 states. And if Iowa is showing us that it's a 3-point lead for the vice president, that anything can sort of happen. I don't think you're going to get results from big states with big mail-in ballots like Pennsylvania. The precedent is there for them not to be counted for a few days, and I think that's going to be the case probably in Florida too, which I expect to be a little closer than people expect. North Carolina, which will be close. So I would brace for a few days. But if the big prizes do come in and there's no real avenue to victory for one of the candidates, I think certainly Harris would concede before Trump, but I don't think that's going to be what happens.
Michael, I appreciate you making yourself available, and I know we'll see more of you this week and look forward to your coverage on TYT. Michael Shure, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.